All right, let's see how sharp you really are. Today, we're testing your knowledge of something every organization relies on, but surprisingly few organizations manage perfectly. Governance documentation, policies, committee minutes, approvals, decision records, evidence, version histories, and the documents that may one day have to prove exactly what happened. 10 questions, no hints, no second chances. I'll give you the statement. You decide, fact or fiction. Some will sound obvious, some are designed to catch you out, and a few challenge assumptions that even experienced professionals make. Think fast, trust your instincts, and keep score because this one gets tricky. Ready? Let's test your governance knowledge. Question 1. Here's your first statement. If an organization has a governance policy documented in writing, that proves the organization is following the policy. The answer is fiction. A documented policy proves that a policy exists. It does not automatically prove that the policy is actually being followed. That distinction is fundamental to effective governance. An organization might have beautifully written policies covering risk management, conflicts of interest, cybersecurity, vendor oversight, approvals, escalation procedures, and dozens of other areas. But governance is not measured by how impressive the policy library looks. It is measured by what actually happens. Evidence might include approvals, meeting records, monitoring reports, completed reviews, exception logs, attestations, escalation records, and documented actions. In other words, documentation can define the control. Evidence helps demonstrate that the control actually operated. That difference becomes extremely important during audits, due diligence, regulatory reviews, and internal governance assessments. Score yourself 1 point if you got it right. Question 2. Next statement. Meeting minutes should record every single word spoken during a governance committee meeting. The answer is fiction. Minutes generally aren't intended to be a word-for-word transcript. The purpose is normally to create a meaningful record of the meeting. That can include what matters most, the topics considered, important discussion points, decisions reached, approvals made, objections or conflicts where relevant, actions assigned, and significant matters requiring follow-up. A transcript can actually create a different problem. It may bury the important governance information inside pages and pages of unnecessary conversation. Good minutes should allow someone reviewing the meeting later to understand what was considered, what was decided, and what needs to happen next. Governance documentation isn't about recording the most information possible. It's about recording the right information appropriately. Question 3. Let's continue. An outdated governance document can sometimes create more risk than having no document at all. The answer is fact. This is where document management becomes governance. Imagine employees relying on an old procedure. Perhaps responsibilities have changed. Approval limits have been updated. A committee has been restructured. A regulatory requirement has changed. Or a completely different process is now being used. If an outdated document remains accessible and appears authoritative, people may continue following instructions that are no longer appropriate. That is why governance documentation should have life cycle management. Organizations should know things such as who owns this document, which version is current, when was it approved, when must it be reviewed, what replaced the previous version, and who needs to know that something changed. A document repository stores files. A governance system manages their life cycle. Question 4. Pay attention to this one. If a governance decision was made correctly, failing to document that decision normally does not matter. The answer is fiction. A good decision with poor documentation can still create a governance problem. Months or years later, someone may ask, Who approved this? What information did they consider? When was the decision made? Were conflicts identified? Was the correct authority used? Were alternatives discussed? Was an exception granted? Why was this particular course of action chosen? If there is no reliable record, reconstructing the decision can become extremely difficult. And memories are not governance records. Good decision documentation creates organizational memory. It helps establish accountability, continuity, and evidence. Governance isn't only about making defensible decisions. It is also about being able to demonstrate how those decisions were made. Question 5. We're halfway there. A governance document should normally have a clearly identifiable owner, even if several departments contribute to it. The answer is fact. Collaboration is important, but collaboration without ownership can create ambiguity. Imagine 5 departments contribute to a policy. Who ensures it gets reviewed? Who proposes updates? Who checks whether reference procedures remain accurate? Who initiates the approval process? Who responds when someone discovers a problem? If everybody owns it, sometimes nobody truly owns it. A clearly identified document owner creates accountability for maintaining the document through its life cycle. That doesn't mean the owner makes every decision. Approvers, contributors, reviewers, and subject matter experts may all have different responsibilities, but ownership should be clear. Question 6. Let's raise the difficulty. Deleting an old governance document is always better than keeping it because outdated documents create confusion. The answer is fiction. Outdated documents shouldn't normally be presented as current, but that doesn't automatically mean they should disappear. Historical versions can be extremely important. Suppose someone asks why a decision made 3 years ago followed a particular process. Looking only at today's policy might give you the wrong answer. The organization may need to know which policy was effective at the time. That is where version history and appropriate retention become valuable. A mature documentation system can distinguish between current, superseded, archived, and potentially withdrawn or obsolete documentation. The goal is not simply to delete history. The goal is to prevent obsolete information from being mistaken for current guidance while retaining records when appropriate or required. Question 7. This one catches people off guard. 2 departments can follow different procedures and still both comply with the same governance policy. The answer is fact. This becomes easier when you understand the difference between policies and procedures. A policy can establish the organization's expectations, principles, rules, or control requirements. A procedure explains how those requirements are carried out. Different business units may sometimes implement the same governance requirement differently because their operations, systems, risks, or responsibilities differ. What matters is whether those procedures satisfy the applicable policy requirements and governance objectives. This is why governance frameworks need hierarchy and relationships. A policy may connect to multiple standards. Those standards may connect to different procedures. Those procedures may generate evidence. Good governance documentation isn't simply a folder full of independent files. It is an interconnected framework. Question 8. Stay focused. If a committee approves something by email instead of during a formal meeting, the approval never needs to become part of the governance record. The answer is fiction. The communication channel doesn't automatically determine whether something is governance evidence. Organizations increasingly make decisions through digital workflows, written resolutions, electronic approvals, and other authorized processes. What matters includes whether the decision-making method is permitted and whether an appropriate record of the decision is maintained. Imagine trying to reconstruct an important approval 2 years later. The organization shouldn't have to search through thousands of individual inboxes hoping somebody still has the email. Important governance decisions should be captured within the appropriate organizational record-keeping framework. Governance evidence should belong to the organization, not remain trapped inside someone's inbox. Question 9. Almost there. Changing only one sentence in a governance policy can still justify creating a new controlled version of the document. The answer is fact. The number of words changed isn't necessarily what determines the significance of an update. One sentence could change: an approval threshold, a reporting obligation, a committee responsibility, an escalation requirement, a control, or someone's authority. That tiny textual change could materially alter how governance operates. Version control helps organizations understand what changed, when it changed, who approved it, and which version was effective at a particular point in time. And depending on the organization's framework, even relatively small changes may require controlled revision, review, or approval. A one-line change can sometimes have organization-wide consequences. Question 10. This is the final question, and it's the one that surprises most people. The ultimate purpose of governance documentation is to prove that an organization is compliant. The answer is fiction. Compliance evidence can absolutely be an important function of governance documentation, but reducing governance documentation to compliance misses the bigger picture. Strong governance documentation helps an organization establish accountability, authority, responsibilities, decision rights, controls, oversight, escalation, consistency, organizational memory, and evidence of what actually happened. It helps answer fundamental questions. Who is responsible? Who can decide? Who approved it? What rules apply? What happened? What evidence exists? What happens next? And perhaps most importantly, can the organization reconstruct its own governance history? Compliance can be one outcome, but effective governance documentation should support the organization in actually governing itself. That is the difference between documentation created simply to satisfy an obligation and documentation functioning as part of an active governance system. All right, how did you do? Drop your score in the comments. And be honest, 10 out of 10, you clearly know your governance documentation. 8 or 9, very strong. 6 or 7, you know the fundamentals, but a few governance traps caught you. Less than 6? Don't worry, because now you know something many organizations learn the hard way. Having documents is not the same thing as having effective governance. Policies need owners. Decisions need evidence. Documents need lifecycle management. And governance needs to remain active. Hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next MPG Fact or Fiction Challenge. Because governance isn't just about what your organization says it does. It's about what your organization can demonstrate it does. And knowing more is how you stay ahead. My Premium Governance. Governance that works.